be a cat, because a cat's the only cat who knows where it's at.
Hello, mate.
Everybody's picking up on that feline beat, 'cause everything else is obsolete. A square with a horn makes you wish you weren't born every time he plays. But a square in the act, you can set music back to the caveman days.
This is a ukulele tutorial for Everybody Wants to Be a Cat from the 1970 animated Disney film The Aristocats. We'll be looking at the song in E minor, which works well for the ukulele and allows us easily to play the descending bass line which features throughout. I've linked in the card above and also the video description below to a play-along video of me playing the whole arrangement of the song with the chord boxes on the screen. Before we get into breaking the song down, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, as it really helps me out with making more of these video tutorials moving forward. The song starts in a steady tempo 4/4 swing feel, and then, like the version in the film, I like to change to a double time feel for the ending. I don't really play any particular strumming pattern throughout the song, as most of the time there are two chords sharing each bar, and hence the chord changes come quite quickly. So essentially I'm just playing 4 down strums per bar and adding the odd up strums in between, wherever it feels right. I also tend to add a little bit more emphasis on beats 2 and 4 of the bar. Occasionally I'll play the chord in the second half of the bar early on the up strum after beat 2, like I'm doing in the second bar here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is completely optional and you'll develop what feels right for you the more you play the song. The song features a great example of something that's often referred to as a line cliché throughout its form. This is where we get a descending sequence of chromatic notes moving a semitone or fret lower in pitch each time under a stationary chord. A line cliché can either move in a descending or an ascending motion, and in the case of this song we have 2 descending ones. One in the intro and the verses of the song, and one in the chorus. The intro is 4 bars long, and for the first 2 bars we essentially just have an E minor chord, but every 2 beats the root note, an E in the case of E minor, descends by a semitone or a fret. Now we could just play an E minor for both bars and leave the descending notes to the bass player, but where's the fun in that? And we might not have a bassist to play with all the time. So a common way to show this on a chord sheet would be by using what are known as slash chords. So we start off with our usual E minor chord for the first 2 beats of the bar, and then for the second half of the bar, beats 3 and 4, we get this chord, an E minor / E flat. This can also be referred to as an E minor with an E flat in the bass, or E minor over E flat. What this is effectively saying is that we still play an E minor, but now we want the lowest note in the chord to be an E flat instead of an E. By moving from the E minor shape to this chord, we've lowered the note E on the C string, the 3rd string from the floor, to an E flat, but we've maintained the rest of the E minor chord. For the first 2 beats of bar 2, we're going to lower that note on the C string again by 1 fret and maintain the rest of the E minor chord, which will give us this shape, an E minor / D, or an E minor with a D in the bass. You probably recognise this as your standard G major shape, but in order to make the line cliché obvious to the musician reading the song sheet, in this case it's better to call it E minor over D, or E minor / D. Then finally, for the last 2 beats of bar 2, we lower the note on the C string once again by a fret, but maintain the other notes of the original E minor chord, giving us this chord, an E minor / D flat, or an E minor with D flat in the bass. It might take you a little time to get your fretting hand to cooperate with these chord changes, but once it does, these 2 bars should sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. In bar 3 of the intro we get a whole bar of C major 7, and it's probably worth noting here that the bass is now the open C string, so we've effectively moved down another semitone from the bass note of the last chord, and then in bar 4, the final bar of the intro, we stay on the C major 7 chord for the first 2 beats of the bar, and then we change to a B7 chord for beats 3 and 4. And this is to set us up for the verse. Even though we don't have a lower note than our open C, unless we had a low G-tuned ukulele, the bass note in the B7 chord would effectively be a semitone lower than the open C string, thus continuing our descending bass line by 6 semitones in total. So and then a B, which would be an octave lower than what I just played. However, we can only really call the first 2 bars here a line cliché, as we've changed from the E minor to a different chord in bar 3. So the whole intro would sound something like this. A 1, 2, 3, 4. The verses are all 8 bars each, but the first verse has a slightly different ending to the second and third verses. The verse starts off with the same 2-bar line cliché as in the intro, so an E minor, and then an E minor over E flat in bar 1, and then an E minor over D, and an E minor over D flat in bar 2. Then in bar 3 we have 2 beats of C major 7, and then 2 beats of A minor 6. Then in bar 4 we have 2 beats of C7, and then 2 beats of B7, which is setting us up to go into bar 5, where we have the same line cliché once again. So an E minor, and then an E minor over E flat in bar 5, and then an E minor over D, and then an E minor over D flat in bar 6. Then in bar 7, this is where verse 1 differs from the other verses, we get 3 beats of C major 7, so 1, 2, 3, and then just 1 beat of B minor 7, and then in bar 8 we get a full bar of E minor to finish. I find that getting bar 7 into bar 8 right is probably one of the trickier parts of the song, so let me just demo this for you slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And with the words, 'cause everything else is obsolete, 2, 3, 4. And now the whole of verse 1. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody wants to be a cat, because a cat's the only cat who knows where it's at. And everybody's picking up on that feline beat, 'cause everything else is obsolete. The chorus is 8 bars long and played once after verse 1 and then again after verse 2, and it's the same chord sequence and lyrics both times. So where we had a line cliché over the E minor chord in the verse, we now have one over an A minor chord in the choruses. In bar 1, the first 2 beats are our usual A minor chord, and then for beats 3 and 4 we move the finger on the G string down a semitone, or change fingers, giving us an A minor / A flat, or an A minor with an A flat in the bass. Then for the first 2 beats of bar 2 we take our fretting finger off the G string in order to give us an A minor over G, or an A minor with a G in the bass. Again, you might recognise this chord as an A minor 7 or a C6, but in context I'm calling it an A minor / G, or A minor over G. And then for the second half of the bar we lower that G by another semitone, which we'll find as an F sharp on the 2nd fret of our E string, so the 2nd string from the floor, with this shape. So these 4 chords over 2 bars creating this new line cliché would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. For the rest of the chorus, in bars 3 and 4, we just have a G major chord for both bars, so bars 3 and 4. In bars 5 and 6 we have 2 bars of B7, and then in bar 7 we actually have 3 chords. We get an E minor on beat 1, then an A minor on beat 2, and a B7 on beats 3 and 4 of the bar. So then in bar 8 we get a C major chord on beats 1 and 2, and then another B7 on beats 3 and 4 to set us up to go to the next verse. So the whole chorus would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. A square with a horn makes you wish you weren't born every time it plays. But a square in the act, you can set music back to the caveman days. Both verses 2 and 3 have the same chord form and are almost identical to the first verse, except for an easier finish in bars 7 and 8. So we'd have a bar of E minor, shared with an E minor over E flat, and then a bar of E minor over D, shared with an E minor over D flat. In bar 3, a C major 7, and then an A minor 6. In bar 4, a C7, and then a B7. And then in bar 5, we have another bar of E minor, shared with an E minor over E flat. In bar 6, the E minor over D, shared with an E minor over D flat. And then in bar 7, we have a full bar of C major 7. And then bar 8, we have a B minor 7 on beats 1 and 2, and an E minor on beats 3 and 4. So verse 2 would sound something like this. A 1, 2, 3, 4. I heard some corny birds who tried to sing. Still a cat's the only cat who knows how to swing, who wants to dig a long hair gig or stuff like that, when everybody wants to be a cat. And verse 3, the same except with the different lyrics and a stop on the final chord. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody wants to be a cat, because a cat's the only cat who knows where it's at. When playing jazz, you always has a welcome mat, 'cause everybody digs the swinging cats. At this point in the song, this is where we can go into a double time ending, which I normally choose to start with a 4-bar drum break, but if we're playing unaccompanied, I would do this using muted strings, like so. And then in double time, we just play the 2-bar line cliché over the E minor chord to finish the song. So and I'd normally play this around twice without any vocals, and then 5 more times with vocals to an abrupt stop on a C major 7 chord, and then a B minor 7 to an E minor at the end. And this is probably easier to demonstrate than explain. So with the muted strings break into the outro, it would hopefully sound something like this. Everybody wants to be a cat. Everybody wants to be a cat. Everybody wants to be a cat. So that about wraps it up for this arrangement of Everybody Wants to Be a Cat. As I said at the beginning of the video, I've linked to a card above and also in the video description below to a play-along video of me playing the whole arrangement with the chord boxes on the screen. If you found this tutorial helpful or have any questions, please leave a comment, give the video a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, as I regularly post video tutorials for ukulele at all different levels. If you'd like a PDF of the song sheet with the lyrics and the chord shapes, buy me a coffee, see how to do so in the link in the video description below, and I'll email a copy over to you. Alternatively, you could join me over at Patreon, where all my tutorials and accompanying PDFs can be found in one place. The link for this can also be found in the description below. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.